Good morning, everyone. It's 10 a.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Rebecca Kluber-Dance-Hansinger from the Central New York Library Resources Council. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you for joining us for the ESLN Services webinar series. In today's session, we'll be hearing about New York Heritage digital collections. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping. We will be utilizing the chat as well as the Q&A feature for this webinar. We'd appreciate it if you could change your settings so your messages are going to everyone rather than hosts and panelists. You can change this by opening your chat box and clicking on the drop-down menu above the text box. Feel free to introduce yourself there now. Please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions so they don't get lost in the chat. You can find that towards the bottom center of your screen. Please feel free to submit questions as they arise throughout this session. Our presenter will be taking questions throughout and also after the presentation. Live captioning is available for this webinar. To toggle the subtitles on or off, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and choose either show subtitle or hide subtitle. This webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording will be shared in the next few days. The email containing the link will also provide information about getting a certificate of attendance as well as the slide deck shown today. The forms to both request a certificate of attendance and evaluate this webinar will also be posted in the chat towards the end of the session. If you're interested in more sessions in the ESLN Services webinar series, you can visit the ESLN website and we'll be putting a link to that in the chat. If you are unfamiliar with ESLN, this refers to the Empire State Library Network, an organization comprising of the 9 reference and research library resources councils, each a multi-type library system in New York State. ESLN's unique structure provides support for libraries and archives of all types and sizes into a statewide platform for shared services and collaborations. To spread the word about the work we're doing on behalf of New York libraries, we have scheduled webinars with staff and service providers on the last Friday of each month at 10 a.m. This is the third of a 9-part webinar series exploring the various services ESLN has to offer. We've been covering such topics as today, New York Heritage, Ask the Lawyer, Empire Library Delivery, and more. You must register for each webinar separately, but they are free and open to all. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter, the Digital Collections Librarian at the Central New York Library Resources Council, Ryan Perry.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Rebecca. So as Rebecca mentioned, I am the Digital Collections Librarian here at the Central New York Library Resources Council, and I also serve as a statewide project coordinator for New York Heritage as a whole project. So I see many of my colleagues from around the state on as well. And I work with them to kind of coordinate the project from the big pictures level. And I also work with some of the regional contributors in Central New York in CRC's region. So I'm gonna try to cover a lot in the 45 minutes we have. I promise I do see some names in the participants list that are definitely, I know, are familiar with New York Heritage, and there will be something, there'll be a few things that you might not know, but I'm also going to start at the beginning and, assume that there's people on here that have barely heard of, New York Heritage at all. So I'm going to try to hit all those bases. All right. So in a nutshell, New York Heritage Digital Collections is a statewide repository of cultural heritage materials. Our focus with the project is really on providing free public access to these materials. And so what we're not is a archival repository. We have other projects that deal with that aspect of digital collections. And we have a very wide variety of materials. I'm not going to list all of these right now. But you can see on my screen, there's quite a few different types of materials, and this is not even the full list here. There are a couple of things that we don't tend to have in New York Heritage, and those are full newspapers, which end up in the New York State Historic Newspapers repository, which was subject of another in this webinar series. And we also really aren't set up to have data sets or like raw data. So pretty much anything else that fits our content standards would be eligible. And I'll show you links and those resources in a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of the nutshell. And then to kind of quantify what New York Heritage is in terms of how much we have, these are the numbers as of about 45 minutes ago. We're constantly growing in all aspects of these. So we currently have 354,390 digital objects. And what that means is, that counts every discrete item separately. So if you count the pages of a yearbook or of a multi-page object, then it's well over a million. That number is a little bit harder to quantify sometimes. We have 1,285 collections that contain those digital objects, and those are from 388 different organizations across New York State that have contributed those objects. 8 of the 9 ESLN library councils participate in New York Heritage. Metropolitan New York Library Resources Council, which serves Westchester and New York City, they have their own repository called Digital Culture of Metropolitan New York, which you should absolutely check out as well. So they don't participate directly in New York Heritage. So yeah, we have a lot of stuff, and it's really hard to express, that number in terms of how long, we have something for everybody, but that there's still a lot that we growth areas that we want to see more materials in. So the next thing I want to discuss are the benefits of why your organization might want to participate in New York Heritage. Really, when I'm talking to prospective contributors, the big one is expanding the reach of your materials. So if you have your own repository, or if you don't have any kind of digital presence for your collections at all, you're really limited in terms of who's going to find and use your materials. By participating in a statewide repository like New York Heritage, you're having your materials set alongside similar materials from other institutions. And also, we are indexed by Google, so people doing general web searches find us. A fair amount of our traffic comes from Google, although not as much as you would expect. So we do get a lot of people going, typing nyheritage.org into their URL bar and coming to us directly. So, I think that's a really valuable, you spend all this time digitizing and curating your digital collections. This kind of gives you a platform for having them be more accessible. And this is the next point really builds on that. So there's kind of that civic pride you have in contributing to a broader understanding of New York State history, and really making them available so they can be used. So I feel very strongly that collections exist to be used. They don't just sit there to be stored or hoarded. Most organizations, their top priority is having their materials be seen and appreciated, and building the educational framework of researchers, students, genealogists, the broad set of people who use New York Heritage. You have that audience built in as well. And the last point on the slide is really just pragmatic. So it costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of expertise to run a repository on your own. So not that there aren't institutions, and there are many institutions in the state that have the resources and staff and wherewithal to build and run their own repository. But that's a significant step for especially smaller organizations, or even organizations that might be large enough to support it, but it might not fit within their priorities to spend that kind of money. So by operating in economies of scale with ESLN, we're able to divide that cost amongst the 8 library councils. And we also have a set of staff, and we refer to them as the council liaisons, or the people who work with the contributors, who are experts and can help guide, especially people who are either unfamiliar or don't have a lot of experience doing digital collections work. So we're there for you to help guide you through the process. I am going to take a pause before I go through the rest of my slide deck and do a quick tour of New York Heritage. And this is going to be partially to, hopefully at least everybody on here has gone to New York Heritage, but there's some aspects of the website you might not have been aware of. So I'm going to do this very quickly, especially for those of you who have spent a lot of time working with New York Heritage. I don't want to belabor the point. So this is our homepage. Obviously, a lot of people will just go in and search for a keyword or term. We do have advanced search as well. And then every month, we have a rotating set of featured collections that we pick for each region. And this helps kind of expose some of these, collections that aren't maybe don't make it up to the top otherwise. So I try really hard to rotate it so that institutions, there's a variety of institutions and a variety of collections. And I see a comment from Jenny in chat. Yeah, I mean, small institutions are there's so many small institutions that bat way above their weight in terms of, or punch above their weight, I guess is the right metaphor. And this really helps a lot. I think it is hard, and a lot of those small institutions have collections on par with the very large, well-funded institutions. So I think equity is a great word to use there. I hope that what we're doing helps promote equity within the landscape, and I think there's real evidence that it does. So yeah, we have featured collections, and then there's a couple things at the bottom here. We have the ability to browse by topics and by collection types. So like what different physical formats are in the collections. I'm not going to go through these now, but I welcome you to click around here and explore. What I want to show or demonstrate real quickly is some of the work that we've done in the last few years to contextualize our collections. So we have worked with our contributors to build landing pages for every institution and every collection in New York Heritage. And there's some really, there's some really great, this provides a lot of the contextual information that helps users understand and appreciate what they're seeing when they're going into the individual objects. So this was something that I feel very strongly is important in doing this work is making sure we don't lose touch with the context. So you do a Google search and you can find images from all over the web, that have vast historical value, but the work we do as librarians and as cultural heritage institutions really is the contextual work that we do. We're able to contextualize and make it easier to understand and have our objects fit within the broader historical narrative. I'm going to go to an organization from my region, Baldwinsville Public Library. So as you can see, they have a little bit about their library and a map of where they're located. So, if you're curious where Baldwinsville is, it is north of Syracuse. And if you scroll down, you can see their collections here. So they have 4 collections in New York Heritage. You can search within their collections as a whole, like all 4 collections at once. You can also explore across all 4 collections at once. So I think this is one of the valuable things that we provide. So if you're an organization that is participating in New York Heritage, you can link to these landing pages and kind of have them be the welcome map, if you will, to your collections. And I really encourage all contributors to link somewhere on their institution websites to these pages. I'm going to pick, this one's kind of fun. We'll do the New York Ordnance Work Collection. This is a collection of photographs from a location where they built explosives during World War II, just on the other side of a hill from Baldwinsville. There were some drumlin hills, so they figured if something went sideways, it wouldn't impact Syracuse or Baldwinsville because the hills were in the way. So this is a very interesting collection, and you have a little bit of the historical context well, actually quite a bit of historical context in this case that kind of gives you the history of the objects. And then this is a short statement saying what exactly types of materials are in here. And there's a few other things that we track in here, and in terms of kind of allowing you to browse around. And you can also search within this collection. So if you want to see maps, or if you're looking for a town or a name, you could search there, and that would search across all the objects within this collection. I'm going to go to Explore real quick. And this is kind of drilling down into the actual objects in New York Heritage. So New York Heritage runs on a platform that's a product of OCLC that is, it's called Content DM. And so this is Content DM now, but before we were in Drupal, which is a kind of custom built front end. So you can scroll through and you can see all the objects in this collection. And we can just kind of pick one. So this guy's packing some explosives in a box. Now we can actually see and zoom in and kind of get all the way drilled down into the object. And another important thing I want to point out here is there's a set of metadata that was produced to describe this object. This fills two major important features. One is when you found this object, you can scroll down and you can see what you're looking at and a little bit more information and data about that. The other thing is this also can work with search in terms of exposing keywords and faceted search within the Content DM search functionality as well. So I'm going to get into the process of creating a digital collection in a minute, but I think one of the things that's often lost when people are just getting started is the time and effort that goes, and the importance of this work in producing this metadata. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water, and then I'm going to go back into my slides. And as Rebecca mentioned, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A module as I'm going. That way I can answer them where I am instead of circling back as much. So don't feel like you're interrupting me at all by doing that. All right, so as promised, I'm going to do the Cliff Notes version of how to create a digital collection. There are 5 major steps to somewhat oversimplify the process. And by working with your ESLN council and the council liaison, that the individual at that council who will work with you, they can help you through all 5 of these steps. And I think that again is one of the main things that we're providing as a service is the guidance along this. If you're doing this on your own, you'd have to figure out your workflow and your process and where to start for all 5 of these. So the first step is identify. So we do have a collection development policy, which I'll show you, or at least show the link to it in a minute. So there's a set of materials that we're looking for. Really, the way I explain it briefly when I'm talking to potential contributors is we're looking for materials that have regional or statewide or regional interest. And are about New York State or some aspect of New York State's history or culture. And that can mean a lot of different things. If you browse through New York Heritage, you can see things that kind of hit the nail on the head with that, and some materials that might be more indirectly related to those 2 things. But by and large, what we're looking for are things that will be of interest to our users. So, we have materials that tell a story that can kind of fill in those gaps in the historical narrative, or that people can look to appreciate or to learn more about New York State history. So we have, like I said, we have a document that lays that out more directly, and I think it's really important to talk to your council liaisons to talk through this process because I think that's been very helpful when I've worked with my contributors. The next step is maybe the most obvious, and that is to digitize. So assuming your materials are not born digital, they don't already exist digitally, you'll have to scan them or convert, an analog source of like an analog tape or something to digital version. And this can be, as simple as having a scanner on your desk and, scanning photographs to something very complicated like digitizing film reels. So obviously the difficulty and there's a lot of considerations about expertise and equipment. And this is again another spot where you can talk to your council liaisons and figure out a plan for how to approach projects. No two projects are alike in every way. So even things that are relatively straightforward, there's often some considerations that we've done a lot of this work, and we can kind of help talk you through what we recommend. The next step 3 is to describe. So this is where we create that metadata that I was gesturing at when we were looking at that object. And this is where your subject knowledge or your staff or volunteers subject knowledge really comes to the fore. So we can help with a lot of the kind of logistical side of creating metadata, and we do have a metadata dictionary, which I'm going to show where to find in a minute, that lays out our standards for creating that metadata. But really, when it comes down to the content, this is where you all are the experts. And I think, as with all this, there's a balance between being extremely thorough and having a lot of great information there, and also not, overdoing it where you have fewer objects that aren't well described, or that are very well described. So this is in the archival world, what we refer to as more product, less process. So thinking about getting as much materials out there sufficiently described so that we can, have something for everybody when our users go to look for stuff. The next step is upload. This is definitely a case by case, and different councils handle this differently. My council, we do most of the uploading on behalf of our contributors. Other councils do training and kind of work with you to directly upload your materials to Content DM. And this can be simple, but there are definitely some quirks to it, and definitely some aspects where you want to have a conversation and make sure that you've done you've thought ahead in your previous 3 steps to make sure that you made it easy on yourself when you go to upload. The final step is promote, and I think this is where I know I personally lose track of this, but we have all these amazing materials in New York Heritage, and it can be hard to find the time to promote them, get the word out, and social media, even just linking to it in a newsletter or on your institution website. There's a lot of forms that can take, and you get so caught up in just the churn of getting more material up that it's good to stop and think about how you're working with and getting it in the hands of your end users. And I think there's a lot of also face-to-face aspects to this too. So patrons coming into your library interested in something, you can kind of direct them or show them how to use your collections in New York Heritage. But yeah, there's a lot there, and I think I don't know of anybody who does this as well as they could be. So definitely a lot of to consider there. All right, so I've alluded to a lot of this stuff already, and I'm going to at least show you briefly this page. We do have a page on the website. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can find it, where we have 4 contributors. Excuse me, and we have a variety of different things, links and other information listed here. This is a great place to start. Again, you still want to talk to your council liaisons and figure out plans, but this might be, somewhere to look as well. So I refer to all my colleagues. They're all listed here, as well as the region, so you can find which county you're in, and then which council corresponds to your county. Metadata dictionary is an important document that lists all of our metadata standards. We're in the process of updating it, which should be out hopefully in the next few months, maybe by the end of the year. And then, oh, and there's an excellent question actually in, or excellently timed question in chat. Leona asked if you can use our logo in your marketing materials, and absolutely. And I'm glad you asked, because if I scroll down further, that's exactly what's next. So you can see several different versions and formats of our logo, the colors we use. We also produced a few brochures and stuff that are designed to be printed off on an office printer, and you could, you know, set on if you have a rack of brochures or something. And then we do have a lot of other things here. So we have some stuff about legal resources, technical guides. I'm not going to go through this really any further, but just know that it's there and it's a good place to look for more information. Let's see if I can get back into. All right. Hit the wrong button. All right, back to Mark Twain here. Oh, the promotional materials are located around that for contributors page. We don't have too much there right now. We might add more. There's a question in chat, sorry. So yeah, Jen and Christy just jumped in and added links. So yeah, that link is a good starting point. And if there's something specific you need, you can also reach out to your council liaison and see if we definitely have stuff that's not up there yet, that just isn't, or, you know, we might have just created or you know, it might not be up there available yet, but definitely worth checking out. All right, so I managed to go this long without mentioning copyright, but it's definitely part of the pun with the image here, the elephant in the room. So we take the stance that we are offering New York Heritage as a platform for our contributors. So really, we work with you to determine the copyright status and the kind of do a risk assessment in some cases of putting materials up in New York Heritage. And I think this is something that you have to be very careful with. And it's not the same for all materials. Audio recordings have very complicated copyright, and it's often fuzzy. So you know, determining who owns the copyright, even the copyright holders themselves don't always know. So I think this is definitely an area where you should consult with your liaison. I've also linked a couple of resources here that when the slides are sent out, and these are also on the for contributors page as well. But these two websites are great places to start, especially the Cornell University one. It helps walk you through copyright term for various materials, and you can determine whether something would be under copyright or whether it should be in the public domain. There is space for putting things up as fair use, but that also, I'm not going to go into that. We could do a whole webinar, as we really should do more webinars about copyright. It's a very complicated topic, and there's a lot of aspects to it. But we do try our best to articulate copyright on individual pages for objects. We use terms from rightstatements.org. And this is all described in the metadata dictionary. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about this, and I definitely don't have time today, but you know, definitely talk to us about it if you're considering a new collection. The other major consideration for getting started with a project like this is funding. So you know, even though we absorb the repository costs by and large for this work, there is still cost associated with the digitization, description, and some of the other work surrounding digital collections. Some of those library councils do offer grants to fund this work, but not all. So this is something where you definitely want to check with your council and see what grant opportunities they might have themselves. I also recommend community foundations, which there are numerous across the state, focused on different regions. And there's other grant makers, of course, as well, that operate locally. bullet aid from state legislators. If you have a relationship with your local legislators, this is something that you can sometimes work with them to pitch a specific project that they might be willing to fund through their means. And then these can be difficult, but IMLS, so the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which is a federal agency, and this New York State has grant programs as well. Some of those can be difficult in that they end up being either competitive, focus more on larger projects than you might be prepared to start, or just really hard to apply for, or all three. So, this is something where we definitely have had some very successful projects that have tapped into these funding sources. And, but it's an undertaking, and working with your council liaisons who might have, done some of this work or might be able to co-partner with you on a larger grant. That would be a conversation you can have. And then, you have the funding, you have the copyright, you have everything else, sorted out. Who's going to do the work? So maybe the most obvious one is having your staff or interns or volunteers do the work. And this has worked for a lot of institutions. It really depends on a number of factors. When you're in the early stages of a project, determining what kind of expertise and funding and other considerations you need and equipment. That's definitely one way to do this work, and that I think would account for a good portion of New York Heritage collections. There are also numerous vendors. We have a list that is linked to here that we update periodically. And these aren't necessarily vendors that we endorse specifically, but it's just maybe a starting point to look through and see who you might reach out to for a quote. Depending on what you're doing, it can be expensive to work with vendors, but you'll know, as long as you work with a vendor that's reputable, of course, that they're going to do a professional job, and they'll have in theory, they'll have the expertise and the equipment and everything else they need. Councils do offer varying levels of direct support. So CLRC, we have a digitization lab. We're probably one of the most direct, the council that probably helps the most directly with these projects. So we do in-house digitization and metadata projects. Other councils, many of the other councils, not all, have equipment that can be lent out. So scanners or other equipment that could be helpful. And of course, you can always talk to your council and see, I think every project's different, and working through, what the best approach is gonna take that conversation. I feel like I'm a broken record on that front. I should just have all my slides say, talk to your council liaison. But I think that's really the place you want to start with a lot of this. All right, one other aspect that I want to point out that we're in the process of expanding is our exhibits on New York Heritage. So we built a custom exhibit platform in New York Heritage that's based on the Digital Public Library of America's platform. And we've produced 3 ESLN-wide digital exhibits that also have physical traveling posters that many councils have available to loan. And these exhibits pull materials from collections across New York Heritage, and in many cases outside of New York Heritage, and they tell more of a narrative story about a particular topic. And it's just another way of presenting the materials and contextualizing them, really. Now that we kind of built it up and we've done it a few times ourselves, we are opening this platform up to have contributions from member institutions. So if your institution already has collections in New York Heritage, this is something you could consider. Again, talk to your liaison and work out a plan. There is a little bit of a learning curve, and there's a format that we have to organize the narrative and the objects and all that. But I think this is exciting, new thing that we're offering more broadly, and hopefully I know through some of our ARPA funding and some of our other grants that we're going to see some member contributed exhibits. So we'd love to see more. All right, and finally, I think this is one of my final slides. I want to point out that we do track web traffic statistics, both at the granular level, as I refer to it, where you can go through and see how much traffic individual institutions, collections, and objects have had. And then we also have a statewide traffic report. And these two have very different functions. These are screenshots, obviously, but if you click, once you have the slides in front of you, if you click on these images, they'll take you to the actual reports, and you can filter down by months and institutions or collections. And the idea here is you have self-serve access to your page view statistics. So if you're reporting them out to stakeholders or annual report or anything like that, you can grab whatever you need. Of course, if you need something more specific, you can reach out to us. But this hopefully helps see what your traffic has been on your own. The statewide report gives more demographic type information, and you get a sense for general trends on the website overall. It is also interactive when you're not looking at the screenshot, so you can go to this drop down and look at different time periods. And this map isn't displaying correctly. I got to go through and fix it. But if you click on this map, you can see where in the country people are accessing it. And there's a couple other aspects. There's a couple other aspects, that might be of interest in terms of who is on the other side of this. This is statewide. It doesn't tell you who's seeing your specific collections, but you can kind of get a sense at least for who's out there. All right, so I've covered a lot. Hopefully, I've hit a lot of things. I am going to go through the submitted questions that were submitted during registration. I'm going to do this relatively quickly, but if you have questions that aren't here or that you want me to talk about, please add to the Q&A, and I will answer those as well. So the first question was asking specifically about how architecture students can best utilize their resources. So there's several different entry points to any real topic, but for this one, I did create a canned search. So whenever you do a search, you can copy and paste the URL, and then that URL will be persistent. So anytime you click on that URL, you end up back at the same search results. It can be really helpful if you're working with a patron. You want to show them, okay, hey, here are there's a search that's relevant to what you're looking for. So when I do this search for, this is actually on the physical format of architectural drawings. And you can see we have 814 different examples. So it really depends on what you're looking for. This gets you right to the objects, and you can scroll through. You can see more per page, or do any further facet by subject. The other thing that you can do is do this more on the collection level. So we're in the process of updating our collection type lists for collections. Eventually, I think we will have, if not architectural drawing, but something similar that people can see all the collections that have predominantly subjects, or on a certain subject or a certain type of material. So that's kind of the process that you would go through. And I'm not spending a lot of time to show how to use the site as much, but I produced this through a advanced search. I'll kind of leave it at that for now. Okay, so what kind of information can or should be included in the online exhibit? So we do have, this was recently put up, an exhibit creation policy and guidelines. This might get you started. You're of course also going to want to talk to your talk to your council liaison and work through, a plan specific to your exhibit. But this gives you a sense for the format and kind of the general things we're looking for. I think this will get you started pretty, hopefully, on the right path, and then you can, drill down into the specifics of your project from there. Can digitized documents be searchable? For example, word search. So yes, as long as they've been run through optical character recognition or OCR software. The general practice is, most people doing uploads will run it through OCR, and that will produce a transcript that is associated with that page or that object, and that transcript allows it to be keyword searchable. So there's a couple of caveats with that. One is that the OCR has to be run. If it hasn't been run, then the images on their own won't be searchable. The other one is OCR currently only really works on typed text. So if you have an audio file or a handwritten document, then that's going to have to be transcribed more manually. There are tools and resources available to do that work, but it's going to be a lot longer process. But that is a really important step for documents, especially where the data contained in that document is more important than the visual look of it. So a photograph doesn't need a transcript because you're looking at it visually, but a list of soldiers that served in World War I is going to be a lot more valuable as a transcription than as an image. Discuss the highlights of the collection. So I took this to mean like, what are my favorites? And this is a little bit like choosing your favorite child or something along those lines. Plus, there's just I know I've seen most collections in New York Heritage or most of the materials I've at least hinted at, but there's so much there that I really don't know everything there. These are a couple examples of some of my favorites or things that I've enjoyed. The first, the canal boat diagrams. This is the first project I worked on with when I started working at CLRC. There this like architectural diagrams of canal boats from somebody who was working in the 1950s, I believe, and kind of doing research on how they were built. And then Bentley snow crystals. This is a really interesting collection. There's a children's book actually in my kids have it called Snowflake Bentley. It was all about this. I can't remember what his full name was, but he photographed snowflakes, and there's a collection from Western New York of these snowflakes, and they're really cool to look at. Daredevils of Niagara. I included at least one image from that collection earlier in the presentation, but those are all like the people went over Niagara Falls in barrels or tightrope walked. It's just a really cool collection to see. 1964 Rochester riots, I think, is a really important collection. It saw a lot of traffic over the last few years, especially as the civil unrest and the protests that happened in Rochester over some. You probably saw in the news. So of course that had a lot more relevancy, unfortunately, and so I think it's really important to see the collections, and you can see the traffic uptick when current events collided with these historical documents. The last one is Guinea Atlas Lake collection, where it's somewhere that I spent time in high school, and so I could see like postcards and pictures of an area that I spent a lot of time growing up. So yeah, there's kind of something for everybody, and it's hard to say exactly the best is. It really depends on your perspective. But those are some of my favorites. Please address copyright and rights for the use of posted materials. Again, this could be a whole subject in and of itself. And there's no way I could sufficiently cover it right now, but I hopefully at least touched on it and talk to some, put up some resources. So that could be a starting point. I realize I'm coming to the end of my time, but as long as it's okay, I'll keep going. And if people need to leave, I understand. But I think this was scheduled for 45 minutes. Okay, cool. I'll keep talking then. So last submitted question, then I'm going to circle back to some of the questions that have come in the chat and Q&A. Is there a way to swap out files of an entry without creating a new one and deleting the original? So this is a more specific, like technical support question that I can really address right now. I would encourage whoever asked this question to reach out to their liaison and talk it through. My quick answer is technically it should be possible, but by the time you do all the deconstruction, reconstruction within Content DM, if you have access to the original files, that's often the easiest way to fix something like that. So I am going to say that not easily, and I would probably encourage this person to find a different way to approach that.
So Ryan, as you were answering that, there is a question in the Q&A, which is a follow-up to that question. So you may have, I just want to read it and you can tell me whether the answer stays the same, which is, if we delete the original entry and create a new one, does the link to it stay the same or would it need redirects?
That is a great question. I think maybe it gets more to the heart of what this person's asking. So the answer is, unfortunately, if you delete an object, you lose there's basically blank URLs within the system. So if you delete it, those URLs are not reused; they're just skipped over. So essentially, you would end up with a new URL for that object. And Jen is commenting in chat. It can be done within the client software. It can be challenging, especially as a batch. The only way I know to do it is you can kind of disassociate the compound object and then reassociate it, but that might also create a new URL. Bottom line is email us and we can try to sort out the best way to do that and to meet your needs. Because yeah, that can be challenging. There's a lot of quirks with any repository, and Content DM has its fair share. I'm going to go back up. I think there's a question. This is more of a comment. Becky Burke, picture should have captions for alt text for visual screen readers. Yeah, I think anytime you have a visual object, the more text you can put in that supports that object, the easier it will be for somebody who uses a screen reader or has other assistive technologies to be able to understand what they're looking at. So there is a real accessibility aspect to this, where metadata can be a powerful tool to address that. Yeah, and Susan had mentioned, continuing on the screen reader thing, that wondering how well it works. In theory, it works well. Like I say recent, probably two or 3 years ago, Content DM update made it work a lot better with screen readers. I have not recently tested it out myself, but in theory, yes, it's set up to be able to tab through the text and the objects. How well it works, I can't tell you off the top of my head. All right. So a comment from Victoria that I'm going to read. So some guidance for students on how to use descriptions to construct citations. So I'm glad you bring up citations. I will not say that it's been uniformly implemented, but we do have a link that should be in all object level metadata that points to this page. This isn't going to be perfect for all users, especially younger students, but it does give an example of how to map our metadata to different citation styles. So what I would say is this might be a starting point that an educator could look at and adapt to fit their students. And I will say that not all of these are necessarily going to be populated for all objects. Sometimes there's no date, for instance, but hopefully this is a starting point in terms of how our best guidance on citations.
And Jen added that link to the chat as well. So thank you, Jen.
Right. Yeah, I'm scrolling through, so I'm probably behind here. Okay. Yeah, and I don't think I see any other questions in chat or Q&A. If there's any last minute ones, I'm happy to talk through anything. Obviously, there's plenty more to talk about, and there's no way I could cover it in this short amount of time. But hopefully I showed everybody at least something they didn't already know. Yeah, I think, I repeated it over and over again, but whether or not you're currently contributing or currently even a member of ESLN, which there's non-ESLN members out there, but just reach out to us. We have, I won't say we've seen it all, but we've all done a great variety of projects, and we can either help you directly or point you to somebody else who can help you. So we're definitely, well positioned to help in any way we can. I've even helped people get started on repositories that aren't New York Heritage. So, just ask.
Thank you, Ryan. And I did see we had some contributors. We had some people who said they were looking forward to contributing more. So I'd like to think that everybody got a lot out of this. So thank you so much for talking to us about it. And thank you to my ESLN colleagues who were also answering some questions in the chat. That was very helpful. And thanks to everyone who attended today. We hope you join us for the next session in our series, which will take place on April 29th, which is about Empire State Immersive Experience. And I put some links in the chat. I'll stick them in again for the series, and to request a certificate of attendance and to evaluate this session. I don't see any more questions coming in while I was wrapping up. So I will just say thank you again, Ryan. This was really great. I appreciated the tour through the website too. That was awesome. And thank you to everyone who attended this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time with us.
I put my my email in chat as well. I realized I didn't have that on a slide anyway, so there it is.
Awesome.
So feel free to
Yes.
reach out if you have questions afterwards.
And again, this will be sent out. The slide deck is going to be sent out probably on Monday. Since today is Friday, while this recording is processing, I'll be ready to send stuff out on Monday. So thank you all again. Happy Friday and enjoy your weekends. All right. Bye, everyone.